Okay, so far in this little game we have a player, and our player can potentially shoot the bear. We haven't set a collision up here, but if we did have a collision, we could have a score counter working, which would increment every time the bear is shot, so we could have a score, a number going up. Now I'm going to add in something a little bit different. So essentially I'm going to add in a little hidden game within this. So what I want to do is when I click the bear, if I just literally click it with the mouse, I want to be able to go into almost like a sub game, right? So another room to play something else, and then come back from that room once, say, a timer has elapsed. So this is going to be it's going to be a longer tutorial, but there's going to be a lot more to this than what first meets the eye. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do is we need to go into our OBear, and I need to add in an event, which is going to be a mouse press. Okay, so when I press the left key on it, and essentially we're going to need to go to another room. Now I haven't created the other room yet, so let's create that. So right click on rooms, go to create, and then click on room, and we're going to leave it a room 2 for now, right? We can rename it, but I'm going to leave it just as room 2 for this moment in time. Now if I go back to my bear, obviously when we left pressed, we now need to add in a change room option. So if I scroll down here somewhere towards the bottom, you can see there, look, go to specific room. So I basically then select the correct room, so room 2. So let's just try that and see if that works. There you are. So I can see that's worked now, because that's gone on to the second room, and there's nothing in the second room at the moment. Now in the second room, what we are going to look at doing is we'll use a tile set. So we'll make a little scene, and I tell you what, we'll make the scene first before we start talking about anything more. Now before we go any further and using a tile set, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean this up a little bit and put these into groups. So I'm going to right click on the sprites, go to create group, and I'm going to say room 1. So everything now that I've got so far here is going to go into room 1, and then we're going to create another folder here, create group. We're going to call this room 2. So everything now from now on is going to go into my room 2. Now at the moment I've managed to get an image, so I'm just going to get my sprites up here in a moment, and if I click on this one, I don't know if this is the right one. Let me just double click on the sample. No, it wasn't this one. So I've got a sprite pack, and I'm just going to have to find it really quickly. It's going to be here somewhere. Is it going to be that one? No, it's not going to be this one. Right, give me 2 seconds. Okay, so what we are going to do is we're going to use something like this, and we're going to essentially build up our image using some sprites. Now I've got these sprites off itch.io, and they're all here. So I'm going to import these 3 things. This here is an example. So I'm going to import these 3, and I'm going to just drop them into room 2 for now. But tell you what I should do is I should make another folder. So in here, I'm just going to right click on room 2, create group, and we're going to call this one something like backgrounds. Okay, so let's go back to the folder I just had up. There we are, and I'm going to drag these in, leave them go, and you can see they've all just come in there quite nicely. Great. Okay, now these are rather small files, right? They're not big in terms of sizing. So if you did want to resize them, if we click on the resize sprite here, here's a really quick tip. If you wanted to double the size of them, if you change this scaling to percentage and just change that to 200%, and then click on apply, what that'll do is it'll apply it then as a 200% increase to make everything a little bit bigger, because we are gonna need to make things a little bit bigger for us. So if I do the same here, change that to percent, 200, apply, and we'll do the last one now. We're gonna increase that one to 200% as well. apply, and there you are, that is good to go. So we've got our basic backgrounds here. I'm going to make now a tile set, so I'm going to right click, go to create, and then let's go to tile set. I'm going to call this one tile, we'll call it tile floor, and then I'm going to go to sprite, select my sprites, which is in room 2 in background, and it's going to be this one here. Now, one thing you will notice, by default GameMaker does this for us. It basically sets the width and the height to 16 by 16, which in fact that will work out quite well for us here. If you wanted to go higher than 16, you wanted to go up to say 32, you can just change these, and I have got another tutorial talking about tile sets in another video, but that'll be enough for us. Now I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm going to do another tile set. Instead of tile floor, I'm going to call it tile tree, right? And I'll explain why later. So let's do tile tree. Select the sprite again. Okay, and again 1616 is fine at the moment, so let me close that, and that's done. Okay, so let's go back to our room 2, and we can start building our room 2 up. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to add in a new tile layer. So you can see now that's just called tile 1, and I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to call this trees. And the reason I called it tree is because obviously I've called that tile tree. And then what we do is we select the tile set, tile tree. We're going to make then a tile floor. So click on that, rename floor. And again, we're going to select the same tile set, tile floor. Now really, I could have just used the same one here. I didn't need to separate them, but the reason I did separate them is essentially because if we wanted to add something in then to the trees, like we wanted more varieties of trees, it would be easier than trying to manipulate both of them to move everything over. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to go back to my room editor, and you can see my my trees are all here, my tiles are here. I'm going to change the size of this room a little bit. Right, so I'm going to change the size, I'm going to change the height in a moment, and I'm going to change the width of it. So I'm going to make it a lot longer. So let's make it 2000 pixels longer. Now what that has done is, if I just scroll my mouse over, you can see it's made it longer, which is fine. And we're going to make it a little bit shallower. So what we'll do is we'll say make it say 600. Okay, now there is a reason why I've just redone that. Basically the images that I've got are smaller, so essentially the smaller the images, the smaller your room can be. Otherwise you'll have to sort of try and accommodate it in a slightly different way. Now I'm just going to set my background up first. So I'm going to click on the background here, and I'm going to select there where it's got no sprite. I'm going to click on that, go to sprites, go to room 2, go to backgrounds, and the first background I'm going to have is this here, which is my background for that. Now if you want, you can tile this horizontally, so we can see there now that's tiled. That looks quite nice, and we're going to do the same thing again. Then I'm going to add another background layer in here, so that's now just called backgrounds 1, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to call this one backgrounds tree. I'm going to right click on it, backgrounds tree, and we're going to select the sprite again, click on that, click on room 2, click on backgrounds, and then we've got a forest option. Now again, I want to tile that so that it's going along, that's fine. But what I want to also do is I want to put an offset on it. So I want to move this down a little bit. So in order to do that, you need to use the X and the Y here. So if we offset this, I'm just going to put a figure in here, let's say 50 as an example. What it does is it moves this down 50 pixels. Now we can probably move this down a little bit more. So if we go down, let's go down to say 80 pixels. There you are, that's okay. And if we need to go back here later to move it down, we can. So far so good. We've got 2 of our backgrounds set up, and we are now going to start making our floor, and then we'll start making our trees. Now this will take a few moments to do, so you might want to watch me do the first part of it and then skip forward through the rest of the video until we get to the end part when we start programming our characters. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to double click on the floor, and what I'm going to do is select, using these tiles here, just select this go over a few, and I'm gonna just put it in here just to start with. There you are. Okay, so you can see now that's the start part. Now I've gonna select this part here, and we're gonna put these in. Now you'll notice I've just made a bit of a mistake here because I didn't select all of it there. So let's just go back here, and there you are. That's fine. So I've got my repeating pattern going on, and now we need to do a little bit more. We'll just do that one, and you'll see why now I've included a little bit of the tree in a moment, because we're now going to switch to the tree layer. So if I click on my tree layer now, again it's the same layer that we've got. So let's grab the rest of this tree. Now you may have to do this in sections, because as you can probably just about see, the grass is here on the tree. So let's break that down there. Let's make that there. Let's fit this in. There you are. So click on that, that's good. And then let's get the rest of these here. And we're going to just put that on the end there. And there you are, that's my tree done. I'm going to go back to my floor layer, and then we're just going to select some of these other ones here. And then I'm going to just to break it up a little bit, use this one. Now if you wanted to, we could flip this around the other way. And as you can see now, I've got that going the other way. That's fine. Let's grab some of these and let's flip that back the other way. I don't think that's going to make too much of a difference, but you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm just building this up. Let's add another tree in. So I'm going to add that start part of the tree. Let's click back on our trees, and we're going to do the same thing we did just earlier. Selecting the majority of that tree there, putting it in here, and then we'll select the rest of the tree there, just so that it's got to the edge here. Now, the reason I'm building this up in layers will become apparent later, but essentially if you build this up in using different layers, it allows you to turn things on and off. If I didn't do that, what would happen is, let's say for argument's sake I wanted to put this tree in, right? Now the tree fits fairly well over there, but if we go over here, let's say for example we want to put the tree there, you can see this black background is coming through, right? So I always try to separate this throughout the layers. So I'm just going to continue on now, just doing this last row really quickly. Okay, so far so good. This is my background, and let's just play that and see what it looks like. And let's click on the bear, and you can see we've hit a bit of a problem. Now the reason we've just hit this problem is because this is 2000 pixels wide by 600 pixels deep, and what's happening is the GameMaker software is trying to squeeze the 2000 pixels inside this area here. So what we can do is we can essentially use something called viewports on our room. So if I click on, make a note of that, 2000 by 600. Let's enable viewport. Let's make our viewport visible, and you can see at the moment it's coming up with a large sort of camera around it, and you can see the width and the height there is 1366 by 768. So let's make that smaller to 600, because that then will fit the bottom of our page. And then 1366, that's still a fair size. Let's try that one. But again, it still needs a little bit of tweaking. So if we go here and we change this to 800, there we are, that's much better. Now what we are going to do to make things a little bit bigger here, we're going to use this viewport here. So I'm going to say, I'm going to basically double these two sizes. Now I can do this because the monitor that I'm using is a high resolution monitor. If you're not using a high resolution monitor, you might not need to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 1600 and then I'm going to put 1200 in here and just watch what this will do now on my screen. Okay, so let's click the bear. Okay, so as you can see, it hasn't done a tremendous amount at the moment, and the reason being is I need to increase the size of things. Now we'll come and look at this in a moment when we look at adding objects in, but this is the first part of creating our viewport. Now what we also will need to look at as well is a few other bits and bobs. So let's say, for argument's sake, now I have my bear and we've got our animated bear. So let's add our animated bear in here. So my animated bear is here, my object bear. What I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this. So I'm going to right click and then go to duplicate, and we're going to call this bear room 2. So I know this is my bear that I'm going to be using in room 2. So let's go back to room 2, and what we're going to do is add in our bear. So I'm going to use a new layer. We're going to right click and we're going to rename, and we're going to call this bear. And then I'm going to go to my assets, just drag in bear over here, and I'm going to leave it go just now. So let's see what that's going to do. Okay, so you can see our bear's there, which is lovely, and the bear's just walking. That's good. So that's exactly what I want to do. I want the bear there and I want the bear walking. Now we're going to have to make one or two changes for this. So the first change that we're going to make is when we left press, we can actually delete that event. We don't need it anymore. And then what we're going to do, and let's do that one, we're going to just basically change the outside room. So instead of wrapping around, we're going to just say, well, destroy the instance. So when the instance leaves the room, we're going to just get rid of it. Okay, and that'll come apparent later. Okay, so we've got our room set, we've got our bear set. Let's now start thinking of getting something to shoot. So what I'm going to do in my room 2, right click, and just go to create, and let's go down to sprite. So I'm going to call this scope, because we're going to make a scope. And what I'm going to do is click on edit. Let's click on the ellipse tool here, and we're going to just draw a black circle, like so. I'm going to add in a new layer, and I'm going to draw a line, just going straight down. We're going to add another layer in, and I'm going to draw a line going across there. Okay, so that's my scope layer setup, which is nice, it's lovely. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to make a scope object. So I'm going to go back up to my objects, right click, create, and just before I do that, let's just change the origin to be middle center. Okay, so right click, create on the objects, go down to object, and then let's call this scope. Let's set the scope to be the scope, and let's see what that looks like. Let's add it into the room. Yeah, let's just put it there for now. Okay. Okay, so that our scope there is looking good. It's fine. It's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Maybe a bit too big, but obviously we can make that bigger or smaller if we needed to later. Okay, so what we need to now do is get this scope to move with my mouse. So in order to do that, we need to assign the X and the Y variables of the scope to the X and the Y of the mouse. This is fairly easy to do. If I double click on scope, go to add event, and let's go down to our create, our step event, step is better for this. So what I'm going to do is, in my step event, I'm going to add in a var, and what I'm going to say is x, and I want to give the value of x the mouse x. And what I want to do is do the same thing there with y, and then I'm going to do the same mouse underscore y. So what this is basically saying is apply the x variable, whatever it may be, to be the variable of wherever the position x is of my mouse, and do the same then with the y. So let's just try that out and see what it does. Okay, so as you can see now, as I'm moving my cursor around, you can see the cursor there is moving quite well. Now ideally what we should be able to do is move, if I move to the left or move to the right, we should be able to pan around like if we were panning with a sniper. So let's go and sort that one out, because that's all done in the viewport. Now before we go any further, I am going to change the order in this room, because everything I'm going to be doing now is going to be in room 2. So I'm going to click on this button here, and I'm just going to click on room 1 and move that down. Alright, now if that doesn't work for whatever reason, you can drag that down underneath, and then you can see room 2 now has gone up, and the house there, that little house shows you which room is going to be shown first. So if I go open my room, and then what we're going to do in this viewport is I'm going to basically say, look, click on the object here, and then we're going to say, right, what object is it? It's going to be following the scope, and then how many pixels? Well, let's say we'll do 200 pixels on the horizontal border there. Now we don't need to worry too much about the vertical, because we're not going up and down, we're only going side to side. So let's click on the plus. And now you'll notice our viewport now is kicked in, right? And if I go over here, you can see it's going over. So as soon as I go there you are. And what's going to happen now is, as I keep on going over, we're going to follow that, and then eventually it'll destroy itself and then go off. Lovely. So we've got our viewport now working properly, and we have our scope here working. Now obviously what we need to do is have a collision event between this. So when we do this, we're going to do this in a slightly different way, because we don't want to just be able to hover over the bear. We want to be able to actually click and shoot the bear. So in order to do this, we are going to go back to our scope, and I'm going to click on add event, and then we're going to go down to the collision, and then we're going to go to object, and then remember now it's going to be bear room 2. Okay, so what we want to do in this, normally we'd say something like this, destroy instance. Now if we were to play this now, just watch what happens. You can see it's actually destroying the instance of my my scope. So what we will need to look at is this. We're going to run a really quick test, and then we're going to destroy the instance, but we're actually going to destroy the other instance. So we're going to destroy the bear. Okay, so in order to do this, we're going to run an if mouse pressed. Now if you look down on the side here, you've got an option there. It says if the mouse button left is pressed, then do something. But again, I'm just going to grab my destroy instance, put it to the side. We are going to destroy the other instance. Okay, destroy the other instance, and let's try that one out. So it goes, let's go over it, it's doing nothing. Let's now click, bang, it's gone. Okay, so now we have a mechanism to hover over, aim and shoot. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now, one thing that we are going to need to work out is that with our bear, if I open bear random tool, when you look at our bear has a collision mask set. Okay, now what we can do is if I edit the mask, I can basically say, well, at the moment, if I were to click on the top here where there's nothing, it would actually select the bear. So what we can do is we can basically change this to a manual mask and move this around so it's more focused on the bear, which makes the game a little bit more difficult. We can also change the scope. So with my scope, if I go to the collision mask of the scope, instead of it being automatic, again I can say that's manual, and then I can pull that in so that it's only looking maybe at the center, the very center of this. Now what that means is if the center here lines up with that collision mask of the bear, then that will be fine, that will work, that will act as a collision. If it's not aligned, it's not going to work. Okay, so that's then improving the game even more. So let's keep on going and keep on looking. So the next thing we want to do is we want to get random instances of this bear to be made, because obviously only having one bear isn't fun. So let's add in a new object into our room. So I'm going to call this one Game Manager Room 2. Bit of a mouthful, but it's fine. And then what we will end up doing is, because I'm still in my room 2 here, I'm going to click on Create New Instance, right click, and we're just going to call this Game Manager. And then I'm going to drag that Game Manager into the top corner. Now there's nothing in here at the moment, so let's start by creating something. Let me double click on my room, and let's create a new event. Let's create a create event. So what do we need in the create event? Well, there's a few things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a score counter. So we're going to make a, we'll call that bear score as an example. And we're going to set that to a value of 0. So essentially we will add 1 each time we manage to hit the bear. Now that's fairly easy to do. So let's go back to our collision here where we had our scope. So when our scope hits the bear and we shoot, we are basically going to add in bear score 1 relative. Now that's not actually going to work, and the reason why it won't work is because it'll look for bear score within the scope. Now the variable bear scope is actually living in the Game Manager Room 2. So what we need to do is put a prefix here, Game Manager Room 2 dot bear score. Okay, so basically what I'm doing is I'm referencing a variable here in my scope that's actually stored in my Game Manager. Now I'm going to go back to the Game Manager because I just want to output this somewhere. So I'm going to click on Add Event, and let's go to Draw, and then Draw GUI, and let's go and have a look for my text event. Okay, so it's got draw value. Let's call this bears. And then what we're going to do is we can just call this one bear score. Now the reason I can use just bear score here and I don't have to use the full name is because I'm inside the Game Manager room. Okay, so let's see what this does now. It should put it in the top corner. So let's play. And you can see there, look, bears is 0, and if we manage to shoot that one bear, you can see my bear now has gone up to 1, which is good. So I can see that works quite well. Right, okay, so what we now need to do is get our bears to be created automatically, right? So the way we do this is we're going to use an alarm. And the way an alarm works, think of an alarm clock. We can set an event which will be triggered every so often. Now this is quite easy to do, but there's a little bit of setup that we need to be aware of. So let's go to Add Event, and let's create an alarm, and we're going to call this Alarm 0. So in this alarm, what we want to do is we want to create an instance of our bear. So click on Object, and then Bear Random 2, or Room 2 rather. And then what we want to do is we want to put this, we don't want this on the instances layer, we want this on the bear layer. In fact, I might need to use a capital there because I've used a capital earlier. Now, if you leave this at 0, 0, what's going to happen is the bears are going to be created in the top corner. Now, nothing's going to happen yet because we haven't told the alarm when to start. So what we need to do is work out where this actually is here. Okay. Now, in order to do that, if I open my room, and if I hover my mouse over here, you can see there's variables, or the coordinates here rather, and these are basically the coordinates there. So you can see if I go up here, that's my Y, and if I go over, that's my X. So what we need to do is we need to start the bears to be created from, say, about here, which is going to be 0.100, and let's say up until, say, 0.1500. Now, in terms of how high or how low we want the bears, well, 500, that one there is about 518. My mouse is just down here a little bit earlier, so 540. So we can try that. So we'll use a random number generator. This is easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, right, well, between X, it needs to be random range. And then you can see it's got X1, X2. So we're just going to basically say between 100 and 1500. Now the Y, we're going to do the same random range, and then I think it was about 5, so we'll say 520 to 540. Let's see what that's going to look like first. Now this isn't actually going to do anything because we haven't told the alarm to start, and once the alarm is run once, we need to then reset it again. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a step event. Sorry, we're going to add something into the create event. So let's go into the create event here, and inside my create event we are going to add in a set alarm counter. And it's going to be alarm 0, and we're going to start this after 2 seconds. So because this is 60 frames a second, this essentially means 2 seconds. So let's just try that out and see what it does. Now what we should find out, there's one there, so there should be another one somewhere else. Aha, there you are, look, there's the other one. Now you can see that's a little bit low, that's fine. So we need to change the lowest point in our room. So you can remember now the lowest number here, so whatever we did set is too low. So let's go back to our GUI, no, let's go back to our alarm. So 540 is a bit too low. Let's go say 530. And then what we need to do is once this has created the alarm, we need to then tell the alarm to go again. So I'm going to pop that in there. So alarm 0, and then we're going to say 240. So that's going to create another bear then after a few seconds. So let's try this out. Okay, so as I go down here, there's another bear there. There's another bear that's randomly just created. You might see there's going to be another one there. Look. Okay, so these bears now will just be randomly created every so often. Lovely. So you can see the code is working anyway. Now, what we could have done is to make this even more difficult. If I make the in room 2, if I move the bear layer underneath the trees and the floor, what's going to happen is it's going to appear behind. Now just look at this just as a concept for now. So you can see that worked quite well because that's there. So you can see some of these bears are now, it's a little bit more difficult to see because obviously they're behind that layer. Okay, so that's just an idea if you wanted to do something. That's obviously going to be a little bit more tricky again. Now I'm going to pull my bear up here because I want to be able to see the bear quite easily. Now this game will go on infinitely until essentially we either get bored and close the game, or the game crashes, one of the two. So what we are going to look at doing is adding in a countdown timer. Now countdown timers are nice and easy, and again I'm going to do this all in the game manager. So if I clicked on my game manager, and let's go back to the create event, what we're going to do is you're going to create a variable, and I'm going to call this one countdown, and I'm going to give it a value of 60. The reason I'm giving it a value of 60 is because I'm going to get it to count down 60 seconds or a minute, and we're going to set another alarm. Okay, so let's open up our alarms. So I'm going to click on add event. Let's go down to alarm 1, and inside the alarm 1, what we want is our variable here to reference countdown, and then we're going to say -1 relative. So that's going to take 1 off every so often. We then need to tell the alarm when it should reset. And don't forget, now we need to look at alarm 1, and we need to reset it every 60. So in other words, that's every second. We get 60 frames in a second. Now, if I go back to my create, we need to tell the alarm to actually start. So again, drag that in, change that to alarm 1, start it after 1 second, and that now will work. Now, what you will find is it's not actually going to display anything. So let's display something. Go back to my draw event, and let's drag this in, and we're going to say countdown. Lovely. And then we're going to use the countdown variable, and I don't want it to be 0, 0, so let's move this down a little bit. Let's say 30, so that's going to be then directly under the bears. Let's try that. Okay, so you can see now my countdown, even though it's very small in the top corner, it is there, and you can kind of see it is working, and everything there is still working with that. Okay, so let's make that font a little bigger. It's easy to do. What we're going to do is we're going to make a new font. So right click, go to create, and let's go down to fonts. And I'm going to call this font score. And let's just set it. Arial will be fine for now. I just want it to be a little bit bigger. So we'll go up to 22, just for argument's sake. Let's go back to my old game manager, and then right at the top of this, we're going to then set the font, which is going to be the only font that's there, font score. So now when we play it, it's going to be that much bigger and that much easier to see. Lovely. Bears, 0, bang. Lovely. Okay, so 60 seconds might be a bit too long for this, but if you need to change this, all we do is change one variable. We go back into our create, and we change the start time there to 30, and then we've only got 30 seconds in here. Okay, so what we also need is a mechanism now. After the time has run out, we need to go back to the other room. So in order to do that, we need to check, and in order to check, we need a step event. So with my step event, I am going to use an if variable. So I'm going to say if the countdown is equal to 0, then what we're going to do is we're going to go to another room. Unfortunately, it's right at the bottom there. Go to room. So which room do I want to go to? I want to go back to room 1. Okay, so let's try that out. Okay, so we've got now a countdown. Now the purpose of doing this is so that you could have almost like a breakaway game inside your main game, or maybe you did want to make a shooting type game, your choice. So there we are. Look, we've got 7 seconds left. 6, 5, 4. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. And there we are. It's gone then back to the other room. So we can see that's working really well, and it looks quite nice. The only one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change something ever so slightly. On our room, let's just go back here. On our room, what I want to do is I want to get a little picture of our bear up here. Okay, so I want to get a picture of our bear next to our countdown and our score counter. So let's move on the draw GUI. Let's move this over a little bit. So we've got the X and we've got the Y. Let's move it over, say 30 pixels. And let's move that one over 30 pixels. We may need to move this over a little bit more than 30, but we'll see how we're going out. Let's just try that. Yeah, it's going to need more than that. So let's move this over, let's say, I'll move it over 100. Make it a nice round 100. Okay, lovely. Okay, so if you wanted to move these down as well a little bit more, obviously you can just move these down as much as you want. So let's just go to 60. Space things out a little bit. Lovely. Okay, so what I want to do now is get a little picture of my bear here. Now, if I could literally just drag a image of the bear and put it there, but the problem I got is then when I move around the screen, it's not going to move with me. So let's get a scale event. Now, I haven't used one of these before you, but if we use this here, draw sprite transformed. So I'm going to drag one of these draw sprite transformed in, and we're going to basically say, right, I want you to use the sprite there, which is going to be the bear. Now it doesn't really matter which bear I use for this. And what I want to do, I want it on frame 0 because I don't want it to increment, that's fine. I want it X and Y there. We're going to have to change those in a moment because we've set the origin to be the middle. But we're going to have to play with these numbers a little bit. We need to change the scale. Now the scale is really important. So let's do the X and the Y first. So the Y we're going to need to move over. And let's say, for example, we do 20 and let's do 30 here, just to see what this is going to do first of all. So there you are, that's not too bad at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to move this down a little bit more, and again what I'm going to do, just to cheat a little bit, if I go back to my room, I'm going to probably put it, let's say around about here-ish, so I know it needs to be about 40 by about 30. So let's go back to my assets, sorry, back to my workspace. So I think it was 40 by 30 there now. Okay, that's not too bad. Good. Now, what we can do is we can scale this up. Now, you can see there it's got 1. If I wanted to scale it down, I could say 0.5. 0.5. And then what that does is it would obviously halve the size of the bear to make it really small. So let's make it bigger. So let's make it 2 and 2. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, it's probably a little bit too big. So let's go down a little bit, say 1.5, 1.5. Okay, lovely. So we need to still move this over a little bit on the x-axis. So let's move that over to 40. There you are. So that's not too bad there. So I've got my score counter working, I've got my bears working, and we've obviously got a countdown there as well. So that is essentially how we would make a breakaway game, which is controlled there with our mouse. And we've added in a sprite, which can be used as a little scope as well.